Okay, so before I dive into this one, I know that this one isn't necessarily a prog or progressive rock or metal album, and I know that's generally what my audience comes for, but you gotta give this band a chance. Like, you'll be rewarded, I assure you.
You're a knockoff, facsimile, imitation, a copy. I'll never be.
Spellbound by Murder by Death. So, Murder by Death is a, I guess, indie rock band. You know, they got their starts in the early 2000s, and we're coming up to their 9th studio album off of the heels of their 2018 album, The Other Shore. Yeah, The Other Shore was one of the few albums of 2018 that got the masterpiece status, and I still stand by it. The Other Shore is an absolute masterpiece. If you haven't heard it by now, please go and do so. Like, it is one of the reasons that made me fall in love, or fall back into love, and made me realize what I love so much about indie music from this kind of expression. What I particularly like about this band within the indie scene is that they take a lot of influences from different sources, specifically like the storytelling aspect of like the country and western flavor of things. Like, we're talking about like way back in the past kind of storytelling of country and western, with the singing styles of like a Johnny Cash style, but like the sophistication and the forethought of more of like an Americana with their kind of mood setting, but a very elaborate songwritingship and orchestration of music. They are not afraid to have instruments like trumpets and violins coming on, and in fact this album sees the joining of Emma Tierman on the violin, which is really good. And rounding out, as I mentioned, we've got Adam Turla on lead vocals, guitars, and keyboards, Sarah Belay on cellos and keyboards, who were kind of the 1-2 duo of Murder by Death for quite a while, and are the two main individuals that are here from the beginning. Deegan Thorgensen on drums and percussions are also here. David Fountain on piano, percussions, mandolin, banjo, steel lap, trumpet, all the good stuff. And of course, Taylor Morse rounding off on bass and backing vocals. So coming into this album, you know, I was expecting, I don't know, I was kind of two minds of this album, because on the one hand, I came with so high expectations because of how good The Other Shore was. I love the concept of that album. I love the music on that. As I mentioned, it's a full-on masterpiece. And so the expectations were high. But I also know with the past catalog of Murder by Death, they always like to try something new with each subsequent album. So I knew to expect something a little bit different. And in the one hand, I will say that this album kind of suffers from what to do after a masterpiece. Unlike The Other Shore, which had a continuous flow of music, this one I felt was a little bit more of a collection of songs rather than a full album like The Other Shore was. And that's not necessarily to its detriment, but it does kind of waver a little bit, because I do like that unification of tracks that come with like a concept album. And this album, I don't think is a concept, or at least I couldn't find evidence to show that it was a concept. The overall flavor of this album kind of continues where The Other Shore left off. So there's not a huge break of musical stylings, but what I will say is this album is a lot more intimate than the predecessor of The Other Shore. This album feels a lot more personal in that sense. And I think that's partly because it's not following this big grand space opera of a narrative flow, but is allowed to kind of come back down to a person-to-person sense. And that's not necessarily even to its detriment. In fact, that is to its advantage, because when this album gets a lot more punchy and a lot more sharp, you feel it a lot more intensely. And this is even found within the first track of Get Up, which opens up very slowly. You know, it's unlike a lot of Murder by Death, which opens up with a punch, opens up with a bang. This one opens up like a morning sun, where it's very gradual. It very slowly gets itself going. But then once it does get going and we have Adam begin to really broadcast his vocal range, man, it hits you like a ton of bricks, you know, and it's not a big shout out with the music behind him. You know, it's that contrast of what we had before. And this momentum is carried through with the second track of Never Be, which, you know, is a little bit more of a traditional Murder by Death track. It's got the acoustic guitar, it's got the violins from Emma on there, it's got that southern twang that we enjoy from Murder by Death that I really enjoy, with this very, you know, smooth expression. But even then, like, they don't want to play things completely comfortable all the time. The third track of Everything Must Rest feels like this pop song that, like, I don't know, flavors of Coldplay and Keane would be found, you know, like the UK pop scene from the mid-2000s. It's very jovial. It's really like get up and jam kind of an idea that I felt was very interesting for them to play with, especially with the first two tracks being a little bit more on the somber side. But even with this punch, we come a little bit back down with Sandy. This is where that intimacy really comes in, because Adam isn't just belting it out like he has in the past. It's much more somber. It's a lot more subdued in that approach. And I really, really enjoy the gradual build of this track. It's reminding me of that first track of Get Up. And the violin work on here is really, really pronounced and very well done. It adds that little bit of extra texture and flavor that I really come to appreciate with this album. And then we come into a masterful 1-2 punch with Riders and Incantation, and I feel as though Riders and Incantation would have run the risk of being lethargic, being very somber to the point of being lackluster, but there's always this like drive, and there's always this massive punch, like this energy that is pushing the music so heavily forward. I love how both take its times to get going and get moving, and this is where that intimacy that we felt up to this point, because we're at the midpoint of the album at this point. Wow, I said point a lot there. It lulls you into almost this false sense of security, so that when the music swells up and builds up, it feels like this outleash of emotion, of aggression. This pented up emotion has finally found an outlet, and man, it is powerful. And both of these tracks kind of do a 1-2 punch of both allowing the music to do that. I love the builds, and I love the payoffs. I love how the gears and the coils are tightening for that release by the end of both of these tracks. Really, really well done. And this all comes to a head with Win, and I love the synthesizer on this piece. I love how menacing it feels. I love how grating it feels. It has such a brilliant like expression overlaid on it, and once again, it takes its time to build. It takes its time to really blossom and flourish into this grand expression, and I love that big expression by the end there. So these three tracks, Riders, Incantation, and Win, man, they are juicy and powerful. And so by the time we get to All Go, it's got a little bit more of a whimsical aspect down there, especially within Adam's singing styles, within his presentation and approach. And I really enjoy that this is a little bit of a breather after the bigger tracks of Riders, Incantation, and Win, to allow us just to kind of take a quick breath before we come into the final track of Strange Song. And Murder by Death is such a great closer of albums, and this one is no exception. I love the ebb and flow of this track. I love how it really does like close everything off. If Get Up was that morning sunrise, then Strange Song is that sunset. You know, it's painting beautiful pictures using lots of different colors as the sun slowly dips below the horizon and closes off this album. Pretty serviceable. So in the end, I once again found myself loving this. I don't feel quite as strongly to this album as I did with The Other Shore. It's taken a little bit of time to warm up to. I was initially disappointed, but as with most Murder by Death albums, the more I listen to it, the more I get into it, and the more I love it. I still don't think I'll love it to the extent that I did with The Other Shore, but I still feel as though this band is maturing, they're growing, they're learning from each subsequent album, and I can't wait to see what they've got in store next. Yeah, it's for that reason that I'll say that Spellbound by Murder by Death is still one that I absolutely would pick up in physical format. You know, this is also a great entry point to the band, but I would honestly recommend The Other Shore first. But yeah, this is a great addition to their catalog, and one that I will continuously spin probably within the autumn and the fall. You know, like this is definitely an autumn and fall album for me, just with how darker the textures are on this one, how somber and more intimate the songwritingship is. So that's what I've got for you today for Murder by Death and their album Spellbound. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.